Over the past year, I have been engaged in a project with a team to gather data on how the Chinese government is using technology to crack down on human rights. We rarely think of big data and human rights together, but oppressive governments are using technological advancements to more closely monitor their citizens, control their lives, what they say, and even what they think. Carrying phones to connected automobiles and facial recognition systems, big data is able to collect and sort this data in ways that would be unthinkable even a few years ago. Two specific changes have made this possible. First, technology has advanced now that computers can recognize and classify everything from faces to walking styles, store incomprehensible amounts of data, and recognize patterns that would elude human capabilities. Governments, and especially oppressive ones, are anxious to harness those capabilities. Second, technology reaches into our lives in ways that even a few years ago would have seemed astonishing. Whether it is the cameras that line public areas, to the voice-activated assistants in homes or payment features on phones, this massive data is a treasure trove to an oppressive government. China is the leading user of technology as a means of oppression. The data the Chinese government collects, how it classifies it and deploys it, truly boggles the mind. Chinese government officials have instant access to phone data from chat to payment records while outlawing encrypted apps like Signal and Telegram. They deploy enormous computing power, allowing algorithms to draw from and add to databases of restricted or sensitive words. These databases mark words for various degrees of sensitivity and actions when they are encountered in chats flowing through Chinese networks. Words that run afoul of censors may be immediately blocked or flagged for censor review. Thanks to the power of big data and ever-expanding databases, some of which we have now obtained, authorities in China can literally process every text message sent in a country of 1.4 billion people to make sure it is using approved words. These telephone databases are linked to others that record movement, such as building entry and movement across a city to go to work or visit friends. Building entry logs with phone, facial recognition, and national ID data is then linked to a camera network, allowing the state to use different cameras to track your every movement throughout the day. However, visual tracking only allows static monitoring and not the thought and belief surveillance that authoritarian states obsess over. As cameras and phones collect this data, servers and algorithms are assessing risks. Computers can no longer simply gather data, but they compute the risk we present to the state and know the beliefs we hold. Algorithms have a questionable track record in predicting individual outcome from risky inputs. But the bigger issue is how, in this case, an authoritarian government defines risk. Let me give you a simple example. An algorithm can very simply predict your health risks from tracking your purchases of cigarettes. The bigger problem is when authoritarian governments are allowed to define risk as a religious belief or political speech, and then create algorithms to predict the risk your loyalties lie somewhere besides a political party. For the first time, our team has obtained databases that allow us to analyze just how much data the Chinese government is collecting and even what they are collecting, and look at some of those databases the Chinese government uses to determine who is risky and who counts as a threat. Our team only has a small slice of what data China collects, but what we have seen is staggering. There is literally almost no action throughout the day the Chinese government does not monitor and record. We have more than 100 terabytes of data. Put another way, if you took 100 average computers with a normal 1 terabyte hard drive and filled them with nothing but raw data recording Chinese citizens going about their daily lives, that's what we have. Almost any action carried out in China can be recorded, and the Chinese government is mandating behavior be recorded and stored for analysis. Data of individuals going about their lives in a country of 1.4 billion people generates vast amounts of data when every action or moment is compiled in a government-controlled database. The Chinese government maintains logs tracking battery usage on vast amounts of devices throughout China. Data collected from this allows the Chinese government to determine the frequency of usage, location, and depending on the device, in some cases, hack into the device and control it. Video cameras no longer just capture people in a crowd, but record fine-grained details about individuals that allow authorities to make higher-level determinations. The data collected is not blunt, indiscriminate collection, but detailed and granular, allowing deep analysis. Chinese authorities use the broad range of data to analyze anything the Chinese Communist Party considers a threat. For example, China uses a variety of visual metrics to classify individuals based upon whether they are a suspected terrorist, a foreigner, suspicious, or a criminal. These values are estimated based upon a combination of algorithms, analytics, and links to other databases that help Chinese authorities determine in near real time who to stop. Individuals that have higher risk scores for being a foreigner or suspicious or using blocked words can be tracked across a city to see who they might be with or where they might go. What would take an entire police unit before can now be done from a chair by one individual, and now Chinese authorities with big data can run these on autopilot, alerting them when people engage in behavior they do not like. To process this vast amount of data, the Chinese Communist Party relies on an enormous amount of computing power to take the raw data and assign risk assessments to individuals based upon who you meet with, where you go, your facial characteristics, and even how you dress. Another example is the way Chinese authorities can censor the internet. These risk assessments are fed into algorithms that can immediately delete sensitive words or flag them for additional human analysis. Chinese authorities can place individuals who use censored words on watch lists. Posts with keywords that might anger Chinese authorities disappear. Even graphics and videos are put through algorithms to detect material that might be considered seditious. The Chinese government flags users based upon regular use of high-risk words. Users knowing this create an evolving linguistic game where authorities are constantly restricting more words as users create or borrow words to refer to the originally intended target. Chinese authorities have created detailed databases of how words in text messages or images or videos, even having certain content, should be flagged based upon specific parameters. Use the words or share a politically sensitive video enough, and you will receive a visit known as an invitation to tea from Chinese security services based upon nothing more than computers noticing your specific posts, words, or images. Most worrying is what constitutes risk to the Chinese government. In democracies, we think of violence as a key risk. In China, ideas are a risk to the government. Anything that might make you less loyal to the Chinese Communist Party makes you a risk. Your mention on social media of democracy, a religious belief, or a historical event, a racial or ethnic characteristic, what you wear, or who you meet with. All of this data is put into separate databases, and scores are generated about the risk you present. Importantly, we have found no evidence of any legal system that prevents any government official from accessing any data at any time. Any individual in China can be monitored for any reason or on the whim of an official for not carrying proper thinking. In most democratic societies, data can only be accessed on citizens by the government making a legal request through mechanisms such as warrants. In China, private data can be accessed by the government for any reason on any individual. Security officials can imprison individuals based on private data, not simply for criminal behavior, but for freedom of thought, religious belief, conscience, and political speech, all things considered illegal in China. As our ability to harvest data explodes, this presents a challenge for open, democratic societies. We cannot stop technology's ability to better record every aspect of our lives, but we can set boundaries and laws about how data is used and accessed. Even in the United States, firms have an astounding ability to peek into the most intimate aspects of our lives with very little restriction. Firms like Google and Facebook are the focus of political concern due to their ability to shape debate and information flows that used to be reserved for authoritarian governments. Each side in American politics calls on Facebook and Google to block information they believe does not accurately portray facts or events, with Twitter restricting some posts. Messages can be catered to audience with amazing specificity, thanks to big data and the overwhelming amount of information these companies possess about us. Governments continue to try and expand their ability to tap into the flood of data we're creating. While there are undoubtedly public goods in certain areas like crime, how can we ensure that even open liberal democracies do not sacrifice security for freedom and privacy? What can we do to pressure China and protect democratic rights in our own countries? We need to focus on improved data security and setting new legal standards. We live in a social media technology-rich age where seemingly every detail is recorded, taped, and played endlessly. That means we need to secure everything from where data is stored to who has access to the data. Not only is China collecting mass amounts of data, our team has collected data stored in China that allows the Chinese government to track everything from individuals to electronics around the world. We can no longer take it for granted the security of this data. Authorities in China maintain ongoing mass data collection and monitoring programs on individuals and institutions well beyond its own borders. Data flow is both global and specific to the individual. The Chinese government is harvesting data on its own citizens and foreigners alike because it is attempting to redefine global standards. Open liberal democracies need to take the lead and define data privacy and protection standards to both strengthen our own democracies as well as challenge the Chinese government practices. Defining, enforcing, and spreading acceptable data collection and uses for states and firms will isolate authoritarian practices. Devices and software are designed with these uses in mind. Changing what they can or should do at even a standards level will alter design practices. It will change how products are created. Democracies may not be able to directly challenge the Chinese government's practices on its own citizens. However, it can make it increasingly difficult and unacceptable against a backdrop of greater data privacy standards globally. We need to improve legislative limits on data collection and access by governments and corporations. Google Search, for instance, has such a treasure trove of data that it claims to better predict certain cancers simply from user behavior. Finally, we need greater oversight of how corporations and governments are using and protecting data, from how data is routed to how it is stored to who has access to it. Consumers and citizens need greater assurances and legal certainty about how their data is managed and accessed. This includes a variety of steps from data audits to portability. Technology is a good thing. Technology can also be used to restrict the freedoms we enjoy in open, democratic societies. We see this happening in China, where people can be physically tracked everywhere they go and classified based upon their beliefs or ideas. We must shape the information environment rather than allowing it to shape us.